All right, guys, welcome back to episode 54 of the Canadian Real Estate Homefront podcast. Before we get started, if you're interested in buying or selling real estate, you can book a free call with us in the first link in the description. It's absolutely free, and there's no pushy sales tactics. We just go over your situation, and you guys see if we are a good fit for you. So let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, which is on everyone's mind, is June 5th, which is the Bank of Canada's rate announcement. We were on Tom Story's podcast talking about this and our predictions of it and what we think's coming up. Obviously, predictions aren't that fun, but if you look at the data, me and Brooke were kind of both on the same page of they're probably going to hold on June 5th and then probably cut in July, 25 basis points. I'm not sure if that's the same mindset you have, Brooke, but
Is there a rate announcement in July?
I think there is. Yeah.
No, I think they're gonna hold, just for the sense of being proactive, right? Like inflation's coming down, and obviously what they're doing is working in terms of getting that number down. But I don't think he wants to raise again. I think he wants to really be confident that we're going in the right direction before he adds any fuel to the fire, and has to go back and raise it again afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing he wants to do. Obviously, not even just him, but the Bank of Canada, because they've lost some trust of the public,
Right.
With their inflation reading and everything like that. Like some people are like, well, I'm still feeling it every single day. And it's funny because I was listening to an American podcast talk about inflation in their country and how like the Federal Reserve and all the experts and all the data was saying that, we've got this under control, inflation's coming down. But then the American consumer is like, well, I'm still feeling it every day. Like credit card debt's at an all-time high, everything like that. So like, who do you trust? Is like the experts in the headlines or the actual consumers who are feeling the inflation day in and day out?
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it, right? Because like I'm feeling it myself too. Like
Right.
I have an EV, so I don't pay for gas. But when I hear people talk about gas, it's like this is so expensive. When I go to buy groceries, it's like one bag and it's $100.
Oh, groceries is insane.
It's crazy.
Everything is very expensive right
Yeah.
now.
So yeah, I think that if you look at the data, it's in the range of where the Bank of Canada wants inflation to be, which is the 1% to 3%, but it's 2.7. So you're still at that kind of like close to the upper boundary of where you want it to be. Yeah. Unemployment is up as well, but you just, like you said, you don't want inflation to reaccelerate. Like what if the next print or the print after that shows a 3% rate?
And then he's like, well, now I'm going to have to raise again.
Exactly. So historically what we've seen is that countries, like Europe or Canada, usually I was listening to a podcast today that they cut before the Federal Reserve cuts. Mm-hmm. So like that's like in history, it's been shown to happen where other countries do cut before the Federal Reserve. They're kind of like the last to cut in a sense, but a lot of people are predicting that we'll cut 2 to 3 times and the states will cut once. So we'll see a cut from the Federal Reserve. They also have an election coming up, and elections, usually we see rate cuts. You try and get the economy stimulated and make the people happy. So then they vote for your party and everything like that. So I wonder what that's going to do for the American economy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. A lot of people are talking about the announcement on June 5th, but if he cuts 25 basis points, like really nothing's going to, like, it's not going to change anything for you much. Like, yes, the people on variable mortgages, you'll see a small decrease if they come down, of course, but it's not going to change your life.
No, I don't think so either. And I think this trend of like young people leaving Ontario is just going to keep happening. It's just very expensive here.
Yeah.
And even in BC too. So these like really 2 expensive provinces, you have more information out there, more podcasts, more YouTube videos on how to like go to another province. And, Tom Story said on his podcast that other provinces are a lot, they're in the realm of affordability.
I heard a commercial or an ad on the radio that said, come to Alberta, work for a year, and we give you something like, it was like 5,000, maybe even more. I think
some sort of incentive.
More, an incentive. And it was like, move to Alberta kind of thing. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I was actually on the East Coast too. Move to the East Coast.
Yeah, move to the East Coast. I was actually at a bar the other day for like a happy hour. I met some friends and I went to the bathroom and came out and there was like a digital sign.
Yeah.
And it changes the advertisement and it was Alberta is calling.
Oh yeah. I hear that Alberta is calling.
They're still pushing the envelope on that. So, I mean, it's worked, right? Like the hottest housing market in Canada is Alberta. And that's where you're seeing the most migration in terms of leaving one province to go to another is to Alberta. So yeah. Anyways, it's been interesting. So to kind of like go into like the first topic here, this is political, so I hope no one like gets too upset about it, but I'm going to give my opinion on it, and then I want to hear what you need to think. So this just came out. So Canada will reinstate citizenship rights to lost Canadians. The federal government plans to restore the rights of lost Canadians by allowing Canadians born abroad to pass down citizenship, even if their children were also born outside the country. Immigration Minister Mark Miller tabled legislation on Thursday, which would reverse the second-generation cutoff rule brought in by the Conservatives in 2009. He said there's no doubt that Canadian citizenship is highly valued and recognized around the world. Not everyone is entitled to it, but for those who are, it needs to be fair. Under the new legislation, Canadian parents must show that they have spent at least 3 years in Canada before the birth or adoption of their child is to be legible. So what he's saying is that if you lived in Canada for 3 years, so say, this is where people are getting upset, is say that you came here as an international student, and then you went back to your country, then if you have a child in another country, that child can automatically get Canadian citizenship.
Just because you lived here for 3 years?
Yes. So this is where people are like,
does the parent after 3 years have citizenship?
No.
Oh, just the child?
Isn't this wild?
What?
Yeah.
But you're not a Canadian citizen by nature. You've already come here.
No, yeah, you've come here.
Stayed for 3 years.
Stayed for 3 years. Went back. And then because you were here for a period of time, then your child can have a Canadian passport.
Even if they weren't born here.
Even if they weren't born here. So when I talk about politics and being a political move, is that Justin Trudeau has a lot of support from like India as an example, like Indian Canadians or something, because of this easy path to citizenship.
Right.
So this is where him and Mark Miller are playing these two sides of the coin, where Mark Miller's been quoted saying, we're going to decrease international students, we're going to decrease non-permanent residents, but also over here, we're going to keep you happy and allow your kid to become a Canadian citizen if you keep us in power, sort of thing.
So after 3 years, if you're an international student, you don't get granted citizenship after 3 years. But if you have a baby.
I don't know the whole process, but what I have been seeing is that there's international students, there's these protests in PEI right now. And what politics in the PEI or the political party is saying is like, look, we have too many service workers here. So there was a path to PR citizenship if you were an international student. So international students were going to PEI, and then they were trying to get their PR, and then the PEI government said no, unless you have skills in trades or you have skills in something else, then you can't stay. You have to go back to your country of origin. And now they're protesting this. So this is ongoing right now in PEI, and people of PEI are just like, unfortunately, like we're full. Like there's no housing, there's not enough jobs. There's high school students who want to work at Tim Hortons or have a part-time job, but they can't because they're trying to house all these international students, or not house them, but these international students, or these people are trying to get PR working at these places. So it's a touchy subject and it sucks to talk about, but it is something where it's going to be an election point where they're going to have to argue over it, and people are going to have to take a stance on like which side they stand on. Is Canada too overpopulated? Or needs to cut back, or do we need to keep immigration going?
It's just weird that if the kid was born in a different country after you've already left, right? You came here to study or whatever the case may be, and then you've left, and now you've had a kid in your country of origin and they're Canadian. Like that's like if I go to Australia, for a work permit for 3 years, and then I come back to Canada, I'm living my life in Canada, I have a baby. My baby has Australian passport as well. Like it's
wild because passports are very valuable, and the fact that you're just giving them out so freely is crazy. So I had some connection to somebody who was Colombian, and they came to Canada, they got their Canadian citizenship, but their family stayed back in Colombia. So for them to get a visa to go to another country takes months. It's very hard. It's costly. And even I've told the story before, but I was in the steam room and a guy was in Canada from Russia, and he's like, I'm only here for the passport, then I'm leaving. Because in Russia, you have to do military duty. It's so hard for me to travel anywhere. So what I'm trying to do is get my passport here and for my children, so then they won't have all these obstacles because of, the political scope of my country right now. Wow. So yeah, what you're basically doing is having a passport that's desirable and, very valuable, and just giving it away in a sense. I hope that doesn't come off as rude, but
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of what's happening right now is that, you stop paying tax in the country, you stop contributing to GDP, you stop contributing to the economy because you went back to your country of origin, but here's a passport.
Yeah.
Pretty wild, isn't it?
That's interesting.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Like I found it very difficult as I was researching.
Like I just don't get it if the parent doesn't have the citizenship. Like I get it if you travel and you have a kid in another country, that kid gets granted citizenship if they're born in another country. I actually know people that went to the States 9 months pregnant to have their children in the States. So their kids have, where is she from? A country in the Middle East. I don't remember which one actually.
Might have been expensive.
Yeah, and then the U.S. So their kids have 3 citizenships because they purposely went to the States to have their babies. I mean, okay, but yeah, if you have the kid in that country, okay, fine. The kid technically was born in that country. They have citizenship. But if the parent doesn't have citizenship, one, and is not in the country at the time of birth, or not even just traveling, just living back at home, I just don't get it. What are they doing? Like sending them a passport overseas?
I guess you just apply and then that way you can get it. I'm also I have my UK passport because my mom was born and she lived in Northern Ireland her whole life.
That.
Yeah. She was born and she lived in Northern Ireland until she was like 25, 26, then came to Canada. But yeah, since she was a citizen of the UK, it got passed down to myself. So I had the UK citizenship. Yeah.
But you weren't born there.
I wasn't born there, no. It's because my mom was born there. So I was, she was a UK citizenship. So she was able to pass that down to me.
Huh.
But
not a lot of countries do that, do they?
I think like I could get my Italian passport too, because my dad was also born there. So I don't know if every country does it, but I know that I could apply for it. And my one buddy has German roots and he's getting his German passport. So yeah, it's possible for sure. But it's more so because like the origin was there.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. Like I became a Canadian citizen because my parents became Canadian citizens when they came here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I got the citizenship.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a funny one. Anyways, you want to read the next one?
Yes. Okay. If I can open it.
Is it in the text?
Okay.
You got it?
Canadian bank regulator sees mortgage defaults rising, 1 in 7 of concern. Canada was warned its mortgage credit addiction, you call it an addiction, is turning into a risk for its economy. Now the call is coming from inside the house. Well, for the house maybe. There's been a lot of discussion on rate renewals, and that's a big concern at OSFI. They estimate 76% of mortgage debt is up for renewal by the end of 2026, as of February 2024. They warn the impact will be the highest for those with significant debt, especially those who renewed at record low rates between 2020 and 2022. The bank regulator believes variable rate mortgages with fixed payments are of special concern. These are mortgages where payment is the same for the period, but the amount applied to principal varies with changing rates. When rates went from record low stimulus levels to the highest in nearly 2 decades, the interest costs essentially wiped out any payment applied to principal. As a result, many of these loans experienced negative amortization. Rather than paying off the house, the term extended as the debt increased. So, come renewal, some of these people that have these fixed payment variable mortgages will have to catch up to keep their amortization period at the 25 or 30 years.
You got it.
That's going to be a little bit of a shocker. So if for the past 2 years you've essentially been paying nothing toward principal, that just pushes your period of how long it takes to pay off your mortgage back and back. And 40 years, 50 years, that's not necessarily allowed per se.
Yeah.
So come renewal, you're going to have to go back to the longest amortization period you can get, which is, I guess, 30 years. Supposed to be 30, but 25 with an uninsured, right?
Yeah. So if you've been watching the show for a long time, it's always been of concern was these fixed rate variable products that the payment stays the same, but the interest grows. So the principal is just not getting paid down. So, you could pay $2 principal. So you're essentially just paying rent, although you own an asset, which is great. But what if you bought at the peak of the market with one of these and now you're down 20%? You have a long way to crawl back up. But this is where they obviously see some risk, is that when you go to renew, like Brooke said, the payment's going to balloon because they're going to have to bring that payment back into an amortization that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're on a fixed payment right now, what I've heard the banks are doing, I don't agree with it, but what they're doing is that they'll offer you, like, say you in 2020, you got a low interest rate, bottom of the market, and now you're renewing because we're almost at 2025, right? And now you're renewing, you went from, 1.7%. Now you're renewing at 5.2%. And that's a big sticker shock for people. But what they're offering, and I think Tom Story talked about this, bringing up his name way too much in this thing, giving him too much, giving too much here. But he talked about how when he went to renew his mortgage, they said, "Hey, do you want to take the amortization from 25 back to 30?" So extending it again. So it's like the first 5 years didn't even happen. And I know what happened, but you paid down a lot of principal because those mortgages, the rates were so low where you could pay down a lot. But it's just interesting to see. And when I was explaining this at the team meeting, remember, all the girls had the light bulb moment when they go to renew, and then all of a sudden their monthly expenses become a lot more. Well, what that does is it pulls money out of the economy. It stops people from buying clothes, going out to eat, right? You have to start making sacrifices where you're like, okay, I need to service this mortgage because the most important thing is the roof over my head. The vacations will stop. So what I see happening to the Canadian economy is a continuation of retracting in consumer spending because people don't have as much money to give out because they have to service the debt on their mortgage. Yeah. So,
and that creates a ripple effect that places are going to have to be more competitive if there's not as much demand for services or goods. So in that sense, you could see things start to come down a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too, right? I think that you'll have people servicing their debt, and then you'll see layoffs happen. Like I still predict that unemployment's going to tick up because businesses won't be able to afford to employ people if the consumer isn't out there spending money. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, it's just probably not a good thing. Renewals coming up. There's a lot of money to be renewed in Canada. With that being said, there's still this big divide between, boomers who own their homes outright and don't feel the effects of inflation as much as people renewing their mortgage. But it's going to be hard for a lot of people to service this debt.
Yeah, I'm finding that people that bought even before the pandemic, since money was so cheap and prices went up, they used their equity and got a HELOC or a line of credit against their home. And to pull money off that, it was pretty cheap, right? Putting in pools, doing their backyard, doing renovations, and now servicing their increased mortgage payment and their HELOC. Say you pulled out $100,000 that cost you $300 a month. Now it's $1,500.
Yeah.
Now it's like, we can't do this anymore. So we need to sell and downsize.
So I think OSFI changed the rule, right? You could take out a HELOC of 80% on your home.
Yeah.
Now it's 65.
Since when?
I don't know if it came into effect yet, but I remember reading that OSFI pulled back on the HELOC amount that you can take out because of this reason, right? Of people going to buy pre-con and not when rates go up at a record, the fastest they've gone up in Canadian history.
Well, what's the difference if you just refinance? Because I guess the first mortgage, not including the HELOC, wouldn't be the higher rate altogether. Like if you refinance, then you're refinancing the entirety of the mortgage into a new rate. So people wanted the HELOC to keep their, let's say, 5-year fixed rate and not break it, let's say. But if you just refinance, you can pull 80%.
Fair. I it's a bit over my head, but that's one of the rules that they added in. I was also listening to someone just talk about like mom and pop investors and stuff like that, and just like solutions for the future. And they were saying that buying like an investment property, you need the 20% down, raising that, making it like 35%. So that way, like more first time buyers, because that's what a lot of people are feeling, is that, you have Canadians who have so much wealth in their house and then they're taking out a HELOC or they're saving up and they're going to buy another property. It's hard to distinguish if that's a problem. Like, is that bringing more rental supply or do we want more people to be homeowners? Right. It's be so hard to conceptualize that data.
Right.
So I wonder if, is that something coming down the pipeline? I don't know. I'll have to wait and see.
Interesting. But if it's mom and pop investors, typically they'd be close to mortgage free on their primary residence, right? So if they took a refinance or a HELOC, putting down 35% probably wouldn't change much. Now your mortgage payment is just lower, but you've used more of your equity. It kind of balances out that way if you're right.
Yeah. It should be illegal to take a HELOC on your primary residence and then buy pre-con though, I think. So, man, that's another shoe to drop, but we won't talk about that. Okay, so next one here. Ontario Builder Study shows buyers dropping out of the market. As governments at all levels grapple with the housing crisis in Canada, evidence is building that new home builders and builders won't be bailing out the country with a pile of new supply. Sean Fraser, the federal minister of housing, seems to be everywhere announcing new money for housing or arguing with municipalities or provinces about the right incentives to unlock development. But private actors are suggesting the tide is flowing in the opposite direction of the federal housing goal to get 3.87 million new homes built by 2031. Data presented in an annual report from Ontario's new home warranty issuer, Tarion, based a survey performance in late 2023, suggesting that as many as 250 potential new home buyers dropped out of the market compared with 2022. Overall, 34% fewer people are considering buying a new home, the survey said. Listing price, the size of the home, and style are key elements of their decision. Most negative in the market, those who consider themselves not likely at all to buy a new home, rose from 7% to 11% of the correspondents. So basically, pre-construction is not going to save Canada because people aren't willing to buy it.
Yeah.
They're not willing to pay more money because it costs more money for these homes to be built.
Yeah.
People don't want to live in a 500 square foot shoebox because over time it just these things get smaller and smaller and smaller. So people would rather rent maybe in an older building or rent a townhouse or something along those lines. So even I rented out something in Stony Creek.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, had five offers on it, and it was just over $3,000 a month.
Yeah,
pretty good deal. I know it sounds crazy for a lot of people, like $3,000, that's nuts. But like if two people are making 80 to 100 grand working from home, or you work 3 times a week, you have two kids. Yeah.
My producer gave me a
little,
tissue. I'm a little bit sick.
I think the camera's on me, so you're safe. But yeah, you have 2 kids, or you need an office space or something like that. You work from home. The couple that actually got it both had great jobs, and they worked from home, and they needed 2 extra rooms. So
true.
To service that house.
That was so busy. What's the mortgage on that? Like, what did your client buy it for? So they're renting for $3,000.
Yeah, so their mortgage is insane. So they bought it for $800, but their mortgage is about $2,200 a month because of when they bought the home. They bought it in 2022 at a very low rate, 20% down too.
So their mortgage is somewhere around the 650, 620, whatever.
I know they accelerated their payments because they're just they have great income. They're smart, so they've paid more down. So it's probably less than 600, but even if you say 500 or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
They have a very low mortgage rate.
Well, when they renew, whenever that happens, say goodbye to this cash flow.
Yeah, they won't cash flow anymore. But they're like, well, we can buy another house right now.
Right.
And then we want to keep this one as an investment. And that was.
Are they running the fact that when their renewal happens, what the rate?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, it's like, do we buy another property even if both of these rates go
So
up?
I actually think they'll break even. They might even be less because they got in 2022. They got a 5-year fix, so they won't renew until 2027.
Got it.
Plus, with they're going to take the cash flow and accelerate the payments down because they're going to cash flow about just over $800 a month.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, but imagine if you were in the States, right, and you bought that house for 30 years at that,
right,
at that price point, you'd be cash flowing the 800
for 30 years.
For 30 years, right?
Actually more because you have the pay down.
Yeah, you have the
cash
pay
flow
down
increases.
Yeah, so I don't think their mortgage will ever. Well, I guess it depends how aggressive they pay down the rate, but I don't think it'll ever be $2,200 again. As you know.
Yeah.
Until the principal becomes very low.
Until the principal is very low, because toward the later half of your mortgage amortization, like the first 10 years is like interest heavy. And then you start paying it down like pretty pretty quick.
Well, Steve said something really interesting in the podcast that we were on that kind of has resonated with me, is that when we're comparing the mortgage payment to rent, right? So say that you can rent something for $3,500, and then you go buy something, it's going to cost you another $1,000, so $4,500. But that $1,000 is going towards principal. So it's like you're having that forced savings account. So it depends on, like, now that I'm thinking about this, like, oh, would that $1,000 be better serviced somewhere else? Well, if you're starting a business, you're betting on yourself. If you're good at the stock market and you understand it, or you're good with crypto or something like that. But a lot of people just have that lifestyle inflation, right? They have the extra $1,000, and they're not putting it towards anything. They're just spending it on clothes, or they're spending it on going out. So they might feel a little bit more richer than the person paying down the home. But is the person paying down the home better off? Well, long term, they probably are better off. So this, what's better, renting versus buying? Well, it depends. What at least in this time right now, what you're doing with the extra money today. So I found that to be a really good point, because it is very easy to pay your mortgage when it's like it's just coming out of your account, right? Like my mortgage just comes out of my account. It's very easy for me to pay. I don't even think about it. But you don't really think about the principal that you're paying down over time. So it has that effect where you're going to see good equity. Even when you come to renew, you're going to see like, oh, wow, I paid down. I paid down a lot of money versus, if you had the extra money, are you putting that in your TFSA? Are you matching your RRSPs and maxing it out? If you are doing those things, then, and you're good at it,
necessary.
That's perfect. Yeah. You're the best. You should keep doing it. You shouldn't buy a home. So
it's just necessary, right? To do something if you do have any sort of savings, like even a GIC at 5%, because as things grow and if your money's just sitting, it's not growing, then you're losing money to inflation if it's just sitting. So there's so many alternative ways, like guaranteed 5%. If TD has a GIC that if you give them however much money for a year, you have to keep it in for a year, but you're guaranteed 5%. That's a more safer bet than, like private lending, obviously way more interest, but not as, I guess, maybe a little bit more risky. But it's important to do these things, even if it's like little chunks, right? You gotta do this. And back in our parents' day, you didn't necessarily need to really invest savings as much, because your job just, afforded your lifestyle, and then you had a pension, and that was enough to take you through life. And now just your normal salaries and pension you're gonna, like, hopefully not, but struggle a little bit just based on where things are at and how much things cost and keep fluctuating. And
I only see the value of the dollar going down, and it's because of inflation, right? Inflation eats away at your purchasing power over time, and taxation and everything like that. Like, think of everything you pay tax on, right? Like, you go to an office building, that company has to pay payroll tax. They have to, every employee has to pay income tax. There's tax on the building. Then, you're driving home in the car that you pay tax on to fill it up with gas, that you pay tax on to go to the grocery store, that you pay tax on to go home to your house, that you pay property tax on. It's just,
I was actually just talking about this on my way here. It is crazy.
Yeah. The amount of tax that you pay, it compounds. So you have to find ways to try to mitigate that by investing in real estate or the stock market or some sort of investment vehicle that that makes sense to you. And then you got to look at your yearly returns, right? Like, inflation was 2% this year, more like 5 to 8.
Yeah.
You got to look at that and then see your returns in the stock market, and then, try and get better every day.
Yeah.
It's the only way to,
even if right now it's like not doable, it's important to be educated on this type of things. Cause even if money's tight and you're like, I don't even have $1 to invest right now because things are so expensive and I'm on the salary and I'm single or whatever the case may be. It's just important to know. Even
if you're like listening to this and you're like, I don't have any money to invest, but like, can you put $20 aside a month just for an emergency fund? Like, you just don't know, right? Like, I know $20 a month isn't a lot, but like, say $100 or something where you just have it stored away just in case. Like, I know cash erodes, but sometimes it's better for it to be there and just in case you have a bill come up. So 100%. I think that's where I started. It was like, okay, I needed an emergency fund. And then it was like, okay, I'm getting used to this thing. And then I started investing, and then here we are.
Credit cards are my emergency fund. I'm just joking.
Anyways, I guess let's kind of finish up here. How's the market?
I find the market is like in the price points that I have listings in, it's slowed down the past couple of weeks. I don't know if buyers are waiting for this rate announcement or it's just a slower spring than normal. The price points between like the 5 and 700, those seem to move. If it's a house, condos are suffering in Hamilton as well. There's a lot of new builds that went up and they all closed at the same time. So people trying to get rid of them who bought them 4 years ago in competition, breaking even or even losing money up on MLS. I have a couple condos listed and they're pretty slow too, and they're priced crazy low in relative to like what they would have been worth in 2021.
Let's just quickly touch on that. So 4 years ago, these people bought condos. So it is really important to understand what you're buying and when, because if you bought a duplex 4 years ago, you'd have been in 2020.
Yeah.
The market was good back then, but you probably would have made some money. You would have had some principal pay down. You probably would have bought it for in the 6s and sold in the 7s now.
Yeah.
7 or 8, depending on where you bought.
Yeah. Yeah. And duplexes even went higher than they were now.
Yeah. In 2022, like they were like 900 and something thousand. Yeah. So you would have made some money. So it's important to understand what you're buying, and pre-construction is not always the thing to buy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes resale can be better.
Yeah, totally. Because you have the principal pay down throughout the 4 years that technically you would wait for the new build to be built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. I think that when I talk to a lot of people, like even the upper end market, like in Oakville, I was with my buddy yesterday and one of his sellers came in and he has these 2 like gorgeous houses on McDonald, which is in Old Oakville, like custom built. They just finished. And he's like, we're getting a ton of showings, but everyone's like just not ready to pull the trigger. Yeah. And I feel like it just takes time. Like to sell a house right now, it's not going to be sold in a week. Yeah. Yeah. And he was like, I'm mindful it hasn't even been 3 weeks yet, but he was just like, I'm surprised they haven't moved yet, but it's just it's more of a normal market. And I think that our spring market just happened sooner.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I think
the beginning was way busier.
The beginning was just busier, and that was kind of our spring market. So now it feels like we're almost in the summer now.
Yeah.
And then we have rate cuts coming up. We have people just doing different things, going to the cottage, going on vacation. Just maybe they're not interested in real estate.
Yeah. I think people are tired.
Yeah. People are tired of the economy and everything going on. So, yeah. Anyways, that's it. That's all.
That's all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate the support. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Our subscribers are growing great. It's awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we got monetized, so we're making like 2 cents on every ad that's watched.
2 cents. Thank you.
But yeah, if you guys want to support us and you want to work with us, that helps us keep this podcast going and allows us to give this information out to you. So just book a call in the first link in the description if you're thinking of moving, even if it's in 6 months from now. We'd love to keep you in our pipeline and see if we're a good fit for you. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review so that pushes out to more people. And the short form stuff, you know where to find us, TikTok and Instagram. That's where we get all the big views from. So we appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.